ask Erica to introduce our speaker.
Okay, so I'm going to omit all the titles, all the doctorate and things. So Leslie Griffith is our patron. He spent most of the 1970s in Haiti. Not an easy ride if you read his memoirs, but which I highly recommend. He's been president of the Methodist Conference 1994 to 1995, and then superintendent of Wesley Chapel in London, which has also got the famous beautiful museum that one ought to see at least once in their lifetime. He's been a member of the House of Lords since 2004, and he's now going to tell us what he's going to do next, since he hasn't done enough so far.
Good, thank you. Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. I've been asked to speak about a new chapter that's opening up for me at this particular time, and I hope you'll find it interesting. Last summer, I was elected by parliamentarians in Britain to be a member of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. And I sit as a full member of one of its key committees, which is the one that's related to migration, refugees, and displaced people. The Council of Europe was founded in 1949. It's older than the European Union and must be held apart from it in your minds. And it has given us, of course, the adaptation of, or the development of, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights formulated by the United Nations in 1948, and we have the European Convention of Human Rights, which is one of the great cornerstones of the work of the Council of Europe, dedicated as it is to human rights, the rule of law, and democracy. So that's the big picture, as it were. You happen to have organized this day at a juncture in my work, which has all been virtual up to now. It's the most frustrating thing I have ever done in my life. I have begun to make the acquaintance of people across Europe without ever having met them, to have mastered the Byzantine technological ways of communicating with each other without ever having had a face-to-face meeting with a single one. But this particular Saturday is very important. Let me just say about the Council of Europe in general terms one more thing. It includes Russia, which at the moment, in terms of its record with human rights, is in a curious place. It includes Turkey with its aggrandizing desires to intervene in the Azerbaijan and Armenia situation, and in the denial of human rights is an interesting case. The Nagorno-Karabakh issue, which I have become involved in, where Christian Armenia and Muslim Azerbaijan, both offshoots of the former Soviet Union, are shouting at each other about the abuse of human rights, about genocide, crimes against humanity, and the rest of it. So all of those things seem to me to be tinderboxes for potential difficulties of all kinds. I'm on Monday until Thursday, we have the general meetings, which would normally take place in Strasbourg, but I shall be sat as I am now in my study here in London. And I have two speeches in the course of the proceedings, and one of them will be about the role of NGOs and civil society in democracy as we understand it. And the other will be about ethnic profiling, which is a development of European Council thinking in the aftermath of the Black Lives Matter discussions. One other thing, if I may just say it, where there's a coincidence between what I'm trying to get involved in the Council of Europe and what I'm involved in the House of Lords in our British Parliament. On Monday, the committee stage begins for the domestic abuse bill. There are there are 5 days of committee work to do as we try to improve the legislation, which is most welcome, because the Council of Europe evolved what's called the Istanbul Convention some 10 years ago, which tries to safeguard the interests of women who suffer abuse, whether at home or in other ways. And so at home and abroad, we're going to be looking at particularly the question which interests me, which is the case of migrant women seeking refuge in Britain, who have the Home Office overseeing their case, which is two-pronged. Firstly, they are seeking the redress or the support that all abused women are entitled to. And on the other hand, they are trying to process an application for permission to stay in Britain. The Home Office oversees both of those, and they can be conflictual and denied to women who are suffering the rights to which they should properly be entitled to claim. So here we are with an overlap, and I'm hoping that the amendment I want to speak to in Westminster isn't called at the same time as the speech I have to make on Wednesday afternoon in Strasbourg. I mean, I have all my life tried to practice bilocation, but I have not yet achieved that skill. One day, Erica will introduce me as having mastered that skill too. Anyway, just let me say, because I'm under real pressure from Erica, and those who've been under pressure from Erica know exactly what that amounts to, not to overstay my welcome, as it were. But as I look at these various areas, I should just, one more thing, at the beginning of April, coronavirus permitting, I'm due to be part of a team of 20 of us from the council overseeing a round of elections in Bulgaria. I was to have done that in Moldova, but the virus stopped that from happening back in October. One of the things that I'd really like a forum like the one I see in front of me to be aware of is the opportunity I believe this gives for bringing the voice of the church into the debates that are happening. Let me just say in three different ways. Firstly, I'm becoming aware of the movement within European Methodist churches to move away from historic relationships with the United Methodist Church of the United States of America. Good riddance to them at the moment is what I would say, which would allow Britain, which would allow the British Methodist Church to enter into a European Methodist presence. I'm talking to a bishop who is in Strasbourg. I'm very much hoping that I can align myself with the thinking of European Methodism as I bring my voice to bear in the councils of Europe. And secondly, the World Methodist Council has an officer, it's called the Geneva person, who also lives in Germany as it happens, and she and I are in close contact because of an overlapping of our areas of interest too. And then thirdly, the Waldensians and the work done in Lampedusa, all the terrific outreach and help that's being given that's so well spoken of by Methodists and Waldensians there. I'm hoping to get to Lesbos, and I'd very much, of course, like to go to the south of Italy to see with my own eyes and to bring a more authoritative voice to the debates of the Council of Europe. Well, that's a kind of rapid run through without any opportunity to develop anything. But who would have thought that someone like me, after yesterday was the 48th anniversary of my ordination. After 48 years, you're entitled to watch the daisies grow, or else to push them up. But neither of those possibilities is yet available to me. And so that's a kind of overview, a scamper through the different things that are happening right now in my life as a member of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Thank you.
I think we can open up a little conversation for a minute or two, if anybody would like to comment on the impressive, breathtaking range of activities that Leslie is undertaking, and I'm sure he goes with our good wishes and thanks for all his work. Well,
Isabel.
Duane?
Yeah, that's me. It's actually Joy Stevens under my husband's name. Are you inviting me to talk? To say
Yes.
a comment? Yeah, no, that was so fascinating. And the links between all these issues, the domestic abuse bill going through Parliament. And I've read about, know something about the issues of these migrant women who've been trafficked into the UK and the problems they face. And also then the whole migration issue in Europe. It's fascinating stuff, I would say. And thank you very much for giving us this briefing on the overall picture, because so often we just focus on our own little corner, that it's really helpful to see all the links. Migration is an issue that faces every country, as does trafficking and as does abuse of women. And that's really helpful to say, you know, the church's voice must be heard. Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Isabel.
Okay.
Isabel.
I unmute myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I think you're doing a very interesting work. And you mentioned Turkey, and I lived 13 years in Turkey, and I teach Turkish. And I have seen the, I came back here. I came here in 2001, I think. And now is a completely different Turkey. I have seen this country going down and down, and I have still Turkish friends. So I learned about the news individually, about people, families, and so on. And I mean, this country went to middle age. Now it's middle age. When I left Turkey, it was a country moving very fast, even sometimes getting over the normal stages to go forward. In the 80s, 90s, I worked on top of it. I was lucky to be a civil servant in the Turkish government. So it was extremely interesting to see how this country was going faster and faster, and wanted to be open, and wanted really to be civilized. Now it went backward, down and down, and it is uncivilized. And since a big part of the people are not very educated, they follow this horrible man and believe what he says. Of course, he's very good at manipulating. He's a manipulator. So it's interesting to see this. I mean, it's sad, extremely sad. But I like the country. I'm very attached to the country still, and find it interesting. Hopefully, I still have a hope that one day, I don't know when, someone will come forward and change things. It is starting, because I know someone who became mayor of Izmir, and who is from this former Turkey, and who is progressive and who will change. If he could become mayor of Istanbul, for instance, it would be good, but already it's a step forward, being mayor of Izmir, which is the third city in Turkey. So I still have a hope, but right now the situation is absolutely catastrophic. Human rights are really at their lowest level, and it's catastrophic and extremely sad. So thank you to have mentioned it. And yes, Turkey puts his nose everywhere, even in Africa. I mean, it's incredible. That's all.
Thank you. And are there any other points that anybody wishes to raise? I'm always impressed by people reminding us of the Council of Europe and its antiquity by comparison with the European Union in these post-Brexit days.
Ian, Duncan and Heather have their hands up with questions.
Ah, right. Duncan, will you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. I really appreciated the presentation very much. And I have spent a lifetime working in ecumenical ways for 2 denominations. And I can say that each national church, each denomination has ups and downs. And right now, the Methodists in the United States are really in a difficult position. And I'm glad I'm not one of them, but we are all together. And somehow I'd like to remind us all that when they suffer, we're suffering too, and that we must find some way to bring them aboard into the 21st century and to show my own biases on their internal struggles. I just don't want to give them up. And they've had a role with Waldensians in past decades.
Heather, do you want to say something?
I just wanted to say thank you very much. And it seems wrong somehow to consider this as your retirement, even though many people would claim it is. So I think I was just pondering how you might encourage maybe a wider range of our church members who are approaching retirement or have retired and think that they're, this is it. I'm going to put my feet up now. How would you suggest they start trying to have a retirement a bit more like yours?
Well, my wife would say that she would desperately hope that nobody else has a retirement just like mine. But it was very interesting that when I stepped down from full-time church ministry, which I had done all my life, I already had a platform in the House of Lords. I deliberately had used it simply to make speeches on issues that I identified with. But when I retired, I was already 75 years of age. And I said to the leader of my party, I'm a member of the Labour Party, people wonder, how can a minister go and sit with a party in Parliament? Well, I wasn't going to let myself go into a political environment and not allow myself to do the politics. What was the point of that? And secondly, I think politics is too important to leave to politicians. I was very happy to take the Labour benches, but to speak on issues whilst in ministry. But once I'd finished, I felt able to offer myself to the party leader to do anything she wanted. And she put me straight away on the front bench and a member of the Whips team. And I was the official spokesperson for the Labour Party on digital, culture, media and sport, and also shadow minister for Wales. And that is where I'd been now, but for the pandemic, which meant I wasn't allowed to go into Parliament because of my age. In those first months, we didn't know what to do. And I was not able to afford to pay for my interns to help me with my work. And so I put my name forward for election to the Council of Europe. It has been a most eye-opening thing and terrifically rewarding, I have to say. And if we had time, and Erica Scrupper will tell us that I don't, but if I had time, I could tell you about an educational project that I'm up to my eyes in. I've been chair of a board of directors that is currently building a new school in inner London, where most of the pupils are Muslims, for £50 million. And that's about to come to fruition as well. It's been a fantastic opportunity to be of service in this way. And that's the secret, Heather. If people get the idea that having served in churches until retirement, they are now equipped to offer themselves for public service in a way that few other people are, then they'd go forward and do it. But don't let their wives know that I advised it.
Or husbands.
Well, yes, or husbands.
Thank you very much, Leslie. And as I said before, we send you our very best wishes for your many endeavours, which are, breathtaking to contemplate for somebody who is in full-time occupation, let alone in these later days. So thank you again. Our next speaker is the Reverend Alessandra Trotta, who is the moderator of the Waldensian Church. And I'm going to ask Erica Scropper Newbury again to introduce her.
For that, the person who spoke earlier on, Joy, is the daughter of Prescott Stevens, and I'm sure that many of you have his book. And if you haven't got it, please get it from the online bookshop. And the other thing was Duncan, who spoke, is also the person who sends the news from the American Waldensian Society every week. Very interesting. So just wanted to put some name, or at least some connection to the people who spoke. Now we have
apologies. I accidentally switched off the video instead of unmuting. My apologies.
Anyway,
for not seeing my face.
Good. So now we have Alessandra Trotta, has trained as a lawyer and practiced for a few years, and then obviously she had a call to become poor, and decided to become a deacon. And so she was for the 8 years the president of Centro Diaconale La Noce in Palermo, and this relates to our friends who are in charge of the connections, the Al and Rachel, who are now married, and then she went to become the president of OCCEMI, which is a Methodist equivalent, more or less, of Tavola Valdese, but they are joined. Complicated to explain. So anyway, high-level place, or maybe the highest. And then she humbly decided to be a minister in charge of churches in Naples. Eventually, she became, I'm just saying a few things she did. She became a minister, acting minister in Naples, became member of the Tavola Valdese, and now she is moderator of the Waldensian Church, the first Methodist and the second woman. And she's doing very well. But unfortunately, our friend COVID came in this terrible year. So she's going to tell us a bit about how she managed to survive and do things in 2020. Alessandra.
Thank you, Erica. First of all, let me say how great is my pleasure to be with you today, to take part in this meeting of the Waldensian Church Mission, to have the opportunity to see again so many good friends who shared significant parts of my past service in the church, in Sicily, in Rome, and some other places. And of course, to have the opportunity to tell you all, thank you for your love, for your care, for your support for our church in Italy. In a few days, it will be the 17th of February, as you know, because of the calendar, but as you probably know, this is also a date of a significant celebration for Waldensian and Methodist churches in Italy, but in general for Protestant churches in Italy. It's the celebration of recognition of civil rights for Waldensian and Jewish in 1848, but is especially for us a time of renovation every year of our strong commitment for freedom, for human rights in our country and everywhere. Nobody can say, unfortunately, in this moment, how it will be possible to celebrate. And I look at Pastor Pasquet, that probably is involved in this moment with his church in decision about if it will be possible to light the fire. Okay, this is impossible to say in this moment, I can imagine no. But it's also impossible to forget what happened exactly 1 year ago when churches in the Waldensian Valley couldn't light the traditional fires for another reason, because of dryness. But it was possible to have gatherings, to have a traditional procession, to celebrate. I preached last year, the 17th of February, exactly in the church of Reverend Pasquet. And a week after, I preached in the Waldensian Church of Bergamo, one of the most affected city in the first phase of pandemic. And I was the last preacher in presence for several months in that city, in that church, because exactly that Sunday, when I was there, started the total lockdown before in that region, in Lombardia, and the week after in every part of Italy. And this memory is necessary because you asked me to talk about my first period of moderator of Tavola Valdese, the Waldensian General Board. And for me, it's impossible. I think that you can understand, because it's a common experience, to do this regardless the incredible, dramatic situation started exactly 1 year ago. That was a real turning point in the life of everybody and also in the life of the church. A cut between a before and an after, with the difficulty to remember even what we were working on before. The line of reflection, the front of ordinary and extraordinary commitment in the church and perhaps in the personal life of each one. Some people ask me sometimes, if you had known about what was going to happen, would have you accepted to be nominated for the role of moderator? I generally answer that, of course, nobody could imagine and recommend the first year in this way. But what finally convinced me to accept the nomination in the August 2019 was the trust in the system of the church. I thought that the church that calls you and elects you takes its responsibilities in recognition and discernment of gifts that are necessary, but also in supporting through a real dimension of collegiality that I now can say was strongly manifested also in the worst period of the emergency. And moreover, I was expert enough about the life of our little beloved church to imagine a very complex role that calls to face many difficulties in a church always poised among tension, among precariousness, where finally emergency are for us the normal condition of the church. Growing up in a similar church strengthened the capacity of resistance that help to survive. But of course, the problem is that survive is not enough. I think that this crisis calls everybody in the church more and more not to be settled for surviving. This crisis push to look for a renewed and far-sighted vision that, of course, are questioning in several ways all the level, the dimension of the life and the mission of our little church. But because I'm also under the pressure of Erika, like Leslie, and it's impossible, of course, in this moment to go deeper in this reflection, and I don't want to share with you just the list of problems and difficulties that are the reality. They are the reality of this time. I prefer today just to share with you 3 glimpses on some of the experience that encouraged me to go on with hope in this time. And I didn't think before, but now I realize that for a strange line, to all these experiences are related in some way with the some of the most invisible victims of pandemic. The first glimpse is about something that happens immediately after the total lockdown. In the first days in Rome, in the place where there is the central office of our church, one of the central offices of our church where I live. And you, I think, can imagine the chaotic place that are the surroundings of Central Station in Rome, big touristic city, full of people come and go, the traffic noise, the smell of coffee and croissant in the air, the colorful street vendors. And suddenly one day, the shocked and shocking silence, the deserted roads, everything closed, the total lockdown was really a shocked experience. And in this spectral scene, only the movement of the only people who don't have any house where to close in, the homeless, that were also the only person who didn't know what was happening in Italy. Suddenly disappear all the network that probably was the surviving network for these people, and they didn't know why. The shops were closed, the people that generally helped disappeared, and so on. And while in the palace of the governed, the discussion about the necessary activities allowed was going on, while instruction for our local churches during the lockdown were being studied in the central office of the church, in the midst of the fear of everybody for the unknown danger and risk, a little group of the team of Methodist and Waldensian volunteers in Rome, who in the last 3 years, every Sunday morning before the worship, have been carrying on a service for homeless called Breakfast Time, with a strong determination, claimed every day the right to continue in this service. They claim in front of the uncertainty of local authorities and police station who said, I don't know, we are waiting for a ministerial circular. And as you know, in Italy, nobody is possible to do without a ministerial circular, in front of the caution of the church council, and in front of the hesitation of Tavola Valdese too, that needed the time for consultation. But they said, there is no time. People are hungry. What is more necessary than this? But we ask for a fair sharing of responsibility in answering to this question, because we don't act by ourselves. We commit the testimony of the church in this service. And they finally won all resistance. We together accepted to take the risk in the uncertainty. I signed an authorization and a declaration that described the kind of service. Anyway, denouncing this decision with transparency to the authorities, asking to formally recognize that helping the invisible was a necessity, was a priority. And finally, it happened. But in the while, the volunteers were in the street again, meeting about 100 people every time. They were known, and some people they never seen before, a lot of people never seen before. Personal stories to listen to, but also a lot of explanation and instruction to give. What was happening in our country, the terrible virus, the necessity to protect themselves and the others, distances, mask, hygiene. So invisible for the others, a priority for who are able to take a risk and to act in order to restore dignity also in an uncertain situation. The second experience, the second glimpse, is about another category of the most invisible victim of this pandemic, that are children and teenagers. More than we can think. And this is the example, the witness, for me really moving, of many, many teachers, educators, therapists in our diaconal institution, like Servizio Cristiano in Riesi, like La Noce in Palermo, like Centro Nitti, Casa Mia in Naples, who totally committed themselves with passion, with dedication, with a lot of creativity, in order to keep connection with the children, the teenager, in order to give continuity in the care and to strengthen resilience of children and teenagers, especially that of the lives in the more risky context, where the possibility of a real development of capacities, of competencies, and to go on in the process of emancipation depend really on the opportunity to come out of very deprived and oppressive familiar and social context. And they are isolated in the house, and very often horrible house. So this is another example for me, very encouraging. The third glimpse is of these days, and is related what Leslie talked about before. As Tavola Valdese, we are receiving every day a lot from many members of our churches, the question about what we are doing, what we think to do for helping in the dramatic situation of the refugees in Bosnia, where a great number of refugees that lived in a camp that were destroyed by a fire about 1 month ago, and now are abandoned in the cold and the frost, without food, without anything, and in the total indifference of local and European authorities. Okay, I can say that Tavola Valdese, with the Federation of Protestant Churches in Italy, is thinking, is committed in organize an intervention in this scenario. And we are quite ready to start, but we are also pushing our government to authorize, if possible, a little humanitarian corridor for the most vulnerable or fragile of this group. But what was really encouraging for me is to think that in our local churches, in our members, the normal members of our churches that probably are facing difficulties in their personal life, a lot of difficulties in the life also of the congregation, look for something out of the bubble in which we have the risk to be closed. Look at the world around, continue to take care and to pay attention at the world out of this bubble. For me, is another encouraging witness. And I really, and I hand I really feel great gratitude for this example and others similar that are happening around the mission and the life of our church. I every day pray that God really to continue to guide not only our church. I hope every Christian church all over the world in this moment of closed houses, very often closed churches like a place of worship, of course, not as the real reality of being a church, to continue to keep open eyes and open hearts and to be out of the bubble, because there is out of our bubble an invisible world. It was always invisible, if you think. But in this moment, it affords to be more and more invisible than in the past. And I think that is a great temptation that I hope our God help us to resist. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alessandra. We have, and for very inspiring and stimulating thoughts about the opportunities and the challenges that are presented by the pandemic, and how, you know, other people's concerns and activation can inspire us to our own efforts. Is there any, that we have a minute or two, so if anybody wants to make a comment or a question to Alessandra. Jennifer.
Thank you, Alessandra. Can you tell me if you've come across the work of the community of Sant'Egidio in helping with the refugees and the Lampedusa issues?
Okay. Yes, we share with community of Sant'Egidio the project of humanitarian corridor from Libya, from Lebanon, and now we are trying together to start a new humanitarian corridor from Libya. Of course, in this moment, so this big challenge is going on. In this moment is very difficult because of the lockdown and the difficulty of traveling.
Yes.
But people in the Mediterranean Sea are continuing to die. So it's another reason why we are pushing our government not to stop this project, not because they want to stop. The Italian government finally decided to support this project. Finally, they think that is a good project, and I hope that I am presenting this example in front of the European Parliament, the European Union, as a model that can be expanded all around Europe. But in this moment, we are struggling. And unfortunately, the disaster in the Mediterranean Sea doesn't stop. So yes, we are working together with Comunità di Sant'Egidio with difficulties in this moment.
Thank you, because it was immensely heartwarming and encouraging to see the work that was being done in southern Sicily when some Cambridge Methodists went with Tim to Sicily. Thank you.
So thank you again to Alessandra, and thank you, Jennifer, for your comment and question. And that is a very good cue to bring in our next speaker, Tim Macquiban, and Erica will briefly introduce him.
Hello, Tim. Now, Tim has been in contact with the Waldensian world just 1 year after I came in. So that in 1989, when I thought he was very, very young. He wasn't that young, but anyway, he brought a group of young people from Britain to the celebration of the glorious return in Torre Pellice in the valleys, and then from the high mountains of Agape, he took them to other parts, including the Mediterranean and so on. And after that, then he became member of our committee, and he was the chair for some time for the Waldensian Church Mission. he has in his, very humbly, he said that he's been serving British Methodists in higher education for many years. That is his humble way to say it. He served, and then he, at some point, he was also a minister in Wesley Church in Cambridge, and eventually he ended up in Rome, in Ponte Sant'Angelo, where he had already been for one summer, taking place for a minister who was on holiday. And so he was the minister there, but he was also the first president, I think, or whatever. Director, sorry, of the what is it? The Methodist Ecumenical Office for, anyway, you'll tell us that. And in that place, and then obviously in Rome, that's what he did ecumenically, and he's going to talk about that and other things. So no, maybe about that. Anyway, thank you very much, and we are all interested in what you're going to tell us.
Thank you, Erica, and greetings to everyone. It's good to see old friends and new here on this away day. I was going to talk about William Beckwith, but that'll have to wait for another time. I want to concentrate on my encounters and impressions of Pope Francis and his work, and that's significant as we draw to the end of the week of prayer for Christian unity. Whilst director of the Methodist Ecumenical Office Rome for 5 years, 2014 to 19, this was always the busiest time of the year, with Protestants much in demand at the various events and services organised ecumenically, always with active and enthusiastic Catholic participation. That week was in its whirlwind of events in churches, seminaries, ecumenical institutions, but the culmination was always the papal Vespers at St. Paul's without the walls on the last day of the octave on the feast of the conversion of St. Paul, the site of the earliest Christian shrine to the apostle near his place of execution. Later, Benedictine monastery, and of course, Pope John the 23rd declared the Second Vatican Council there, changing the course of church history. He died before the end of the council, but Pope Paul VI continued its work, which, even with the limited support for furthering its purposes under Popes John Paul II and Benedict XVI, could not be reversed. The modern ecumenical movement can be said to date from those middle years of the 60s, when the ecumenical commissions were established to undertake dialogue with the Anglicans, Lutherans, and Methodists, and soon extended to others. And through the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity, and particularly one secretary responsible for the links with Anglicans and Methodists, and that the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity, its work was associated from an early date with its nearest Protestant neighbours, the Methodists at Ponte Sant'Angelo and the Waldensians at Piazza Cavour. Let's get back to the Papal Vespers at St. Paul's. I was privileged to attend each of those in the 5 years I was in Rome, usually prima file on the front row. Here's a picture of Angela and I being greeted by Pope Francis. Latterly, we were greeted in the narthex of the Basilica and greeted by the Pope personally. There I was representing Methodists worldwide, as well as after the service as he came out. In the 5 years, the service became much more relaxed and less stuffy, in line with this light touch Pope, who encourages wherever possible an easier approach to liturgical services. Untypically, in the final year we were there, the Vespers were held at the beginning of the week on the 18th. The previous year, instead of the three principal persons presiding, Pope, Orthodox Church leader, and the director of the Anglican Centre as personal representative of the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Lutheran pastor in Rome was added to do a reading and to share in the final blessing, of course recognising the year of Reformation in 2017-18. And they warmly endorsed that through the work that they did together on the joint declaration on the doctrine of justification, signed in 1999. To my surprise, in 2019, in the absence of the Anglican Archbishop, I was approached just half an hour before the service and told that I would be the Protestant representative, reading a psalm, yes, in Italian, and joining in the final blessing with the Pope and the Metropolitan. As the third signatory of the joint declaration, it was fitting for the World Methodist Council to be recognized in this way. Here's a picture of me at that ecumenical blessing at the end. The other occasions I met the Pope were at special services, where again I represented that World Methodist Council at the Day of Prayer for the Care of Creation. That was instituted by Pope Francis with the Patriarch of Constantinople, both of whom are keen advocates of our stewardship of what Francis calls our common home, Mother Earth. This is the theme of one of his major encyclicals, Laudato Si, echoing the words of his namesake, Francis of Assisi, the patron saint of the environment, interfaith relationships, since that first gathering in Assisi in Creation Tide 1986 of world faith leaders, pioneering statement on nature. And then there was another occasion celebrating the collaboration between churches and faith communities on the Day of Prayer for South Sudan. On that occasion, I got to share a kiss of peace with the Holy Father as a sign of our ecumenical work together in prayer and action. No picture of that. And on the 50th anniversary of the setting of the Methodist Roman Catholic International Commission for Dialogue in 2017, I was responsible for the visit of both Mcquibbon and the World Methodist Council, who together were granted a private audience with Pope Francis, of which he spoke warmly of our growing understanding and work together. And finally, the other occasions I want to concentrate on were within the 8 weeks I spent in the company of Pope Francis with selected cardinals, bishops, abbots, and other religious, including women and lay people, in the 2 synods of bishops held in my time in Rome. One was on the family over 2 sessions. The first ended in controversy and disagreement, and the other on young people, faith and vocational discernment. The apostolic exhortation issued at the end of the synod on the family, Amoris Laetitia, did not go far enough in the eyes of the reforming wing of the church, but it did allow a more open pastoral approach on the matters of the admission of divorced persons to communion and the acceptance of gay persons' participation in the life of the church, famously summed up in the Pope's response to the question on the subject by, "Who am I to judge?" That approach, rooted in pastoral concerns for evangelization rather than doctrinal purity and upholding tradition, is implicit, I believe, in Francis's person and in the priorities he has set in his pontificate. It was there right from the beginning, from the year of mercy of his first year. It can be found in Evangelii Gaudium, the encyclical. He is a prophetic and bold pope in the spirit, the true spirit of Vatican II, a champion of underdogs and outsiders, the homeless and the poor, promoting the papal almoner to be a cardinal, having a place for them in the Vatican, and regularly visiting social work projects in the city. We once were stood in a bus stop outside the Santo Spirito Hospital near the Vatican, and we saw the Pope passing. He was passing in a battered Ford Fiesta car. Even in the Vatican, he chooses to live at the Santa Marta clergy hostel rather than shut up in the Apostolic Palace. And one of his first visits outside Rome was, of course, as we've heard, to Lampedusa, the small island nearer Africa than Sicily, where migrants had been washed up on the great wave across the Mediterranean. And the Mediterranean Hope Project was born out of the ecumenical work of Waldensians and Methodists with the community of Sant'Egidio. Of course, it hasn't been plain sailing for the Pope, and mistakes have been made, and opposition from some quarters has been vociferous from conservative traditionalists, but he has met such opposition with a steely Jesuit resolve based on silence, turning the other cheek, and discernment, to go the extra mile in dialogue rather than confrontation. The issues of child abuse and the financial scandals he inherited have been met and addressed in an approach which acknowledges faults. Remember, he was the first pope to make a personal apology and admit liability for anything, and devolves decision-making downwards, the principle of subsidiarity, challenging clericalism, involving more women and lay people in the exercise of responsibilities for different aspects of church life. Synodality and collegiality have not lessened the office, but have ensured that a wider group of people, not necessarily the courier, are involved, and all the better for that. At the end of the day, I'm left with my impressions of a man of the people, friendly and smiling, though sometimes not suffering fools gladly. Trump, I'm glad to say, got short shrift on his visit to Rome. Happier chatting over coffee breaks with people rather than presiding over his synod of bishops, more relaxed when he went to wash the feet of prisoners, including women and Muslims, scandal, scandal, on Maundy Thursday, than presiding at set-piece masses, like the canonization of Oscar Romero and others that I attended. A humble, simple man of God, but with a sharp mind and a sense of where he wants the church to go, in reaching out to the ends of the earth, just as he arrived from those ends of the earth, the peripheries, to start his pontificate. I'd recommend to you a book that has been written by Christopher Lamb, who writes for The Tablet. It's called The Outsider. Pope Francis is the one who gathers other outsiders to the centre to reshape the church. Cardinals from Tonga, the so-called baby cardinal, and other lesser nations such as Cardinal Joseph Coutts, who featured on the series from Pakistan on BBC Two last year on Inside the Vatican. So as Pope Francis might himself say in conclusion to anything, buon pranzo, though we've got another hour or so to go, and pray for me. And I think that sets the seal on my impressions of this man of God. Thank you.
Tim, thank you very much indeed. And I like your admission that not everything has gone well, and that he is a pope who has been prepared to apologize. Okay, so can we now turn to Claudia Pasquette, who is going to talk to us about his memories of extensive involvement with the church. Erica, are you going to introduce Claudia?
Yes, I just wanted to say one thing. I didn't know if I was allowed to talk after Tim. One word. It's one person who was very important in what Tim talked about, ecumenical and relationship, was Monsignor Mark Langham, who unfortunately died last week, and who was part of our meeting in Cambridge when we discussed the beautiful thing of the Pope going to the Waldensian Church in Turin and asking for forgiveness for what the Catholic Church had done in the past. And Mark was one of the speakers, and he's always been very, very open and friendly and amazingly ready to talk and to be part of the ecumenical group. So maybe somebody who knew him, or we can certainly write something about him in the next Waldensian Review. And now Claudio Pasquet. So Claudio Pasquet has been, I think he was, he did his year abroad in Scotland, if I'm not wrong, but if I'm correct, he can correct me. He has been a minister for over 40 years in Brescia, Milan, Bobbio Pellice, Torre Pellice. He's now in San Secondo. He's been obviously very popular with the Waldensian mission. So he came twice, once before I started being involved, and then the second time when I had just started. And then eventually a third time he will talk about it. And he also he did lots of things, but he's been member for many years of the World Reform Alliance, and since 2017 he's a member of the committee of the World Communion of the Reformed Church, and I think he was also involved in the Centro Culturale Valdese, of which we'll hear later. So, benvenuto Claudio.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. When I was asked by Erica to tell something about my 2 or 3 missions for the Waldensian Church Mission, I told her, but I can't remember anything. I'm an old man, you know. But after that, I realized that I remembered too many things, so I had to choose what I could say. The first thing is how the vision of our church has changed in your committee too, and how your committee has changed. The first time I was there was 1986. I was 31 at the moment, a young minister, and the leader, one of the leader of the Waldensian Church Mission at that moment was the Bishop Ward, Bishop of the Free Church of England, that I didn't know it existed, but I discovered that it existed. And he used to tell me a vision of the valleys, particularly of the valley and of our church, that I didn't know, because he used to visit our church mainly in the late 40s and 50s. So he told me of a church which I didn't see anymore. For instance, he used to go to visit the small village of Pradel Torno, hiring mules to carry up all the things they needed to live there, because there was not a road. Now there is a road, but there are no people living there anymore. So the changement of the vision that the committee in 1986 had of our church was a church of the past, which it didn't exist anymore. Nevertheless, I can remember coaches of people coming for the Waldensian Day. Not one coach, I think at least 2. So a lot of people involved in the mission for our church. That was quite moving for me. I must say, they were not all young people. There were a lot of quite old men and ladies, but people that for all their life had known what was the mission of our church in Italy, and not only in Italy, also in South America. Normally, we gather in a gorgeous old Victorian building, and after that, it was for 2 days, I think. Once with the committee, another day for the Waldensian Day, and after that, I was sent to visit people all over England. I can remember just few things. In Swindon, where I met a local priest, very high church, Anglican, very high church, who couldn't understand why we wanted still to be Protestant. And he said, you live in the Catholic center. Why don't you join the Catholic Church? Or at least, why don't you join our church, the Anglican Church, which is more alike to Catholic Church? I tried to explain him that Beckwith had tried the same thing, but he couldn't do that. But I remember meeting a pastor, a Reformed pastor in the suburb of London, who was extremely critical against Mrs. Thatcher and the social and the cuts of social welfare in that moment. And so I realized that the church in England was facing a changement, of economical and political life, which would affect our life and our church in the a few years later. I also remember Prescott Stephen and his wife. I stay at their home in Hackfield, and I can remember the true love he had for our church and for the history of our church. I can say I remember him as one of the men outside Italy who taught me a lot of things about the history of my church. Second time for your mission, I think it was 93 or 94. I don't remember much about the meeting, the Waldensian Day, but I remember that I was sent to visit some churches in the north of England, Liverpool, Manchester, Birmingham, not the most fascinating town you have. And there I remember that I had to preach in a church of England, where people then asked me for almost an hour after the worship news about my church. So I realized that it was quite odd that in my situation in Italy, there are a lot of people who do not care at all about our church. And over there in Liverpool, there were people from an Anglican low church very much interested in my church. That, I think, was part of the mission your committee had done in those years. I remember also a reform minister in Birmingham that led me in a visit in the suburb of the town, explaining me the social problem there were with unemployment and difficulties of life of common people. But what I also remember of that visit is an evening meeting in King's Lynn, where few ministers had organized an evening where I had to speak about the life of my church. And these poor ministers were so upset that nobody, apart the ministers, and I had a clear picture of what secularism can be. And that picture became reality few years later in my church as well. The third visit was a visit organized for the Cromwell Day. We are in 2005. There were the 450th anniversary of the Piedmontese Easter, the big slaughter of the Waldensians. And we tried to celebrate the support that Oliver Cromwell gave to our church. And well, I remember we could bring some flour in the basement of the Parliament House where his statue is. And I remember that we were there. I was at that moment, I was pastor in Torre Pellice. We went there with the youth people choir of our church, and they had a couple of concerts, and I had to preach both in the Methodist Hall, big Methodist Hall in Westminster, and also in another Methodist church in the suburb of London. That is another picture of the mission of your committee, which is also to celebrate history and historical relation we had among our churches. General souvenir of these meetings. Well, poor you who had to try to understand my English. Second, you made me work a lot. I did, I think, 5 or 6 historical conferences, 7 sermons, or entire worship in English, you know, which is not evident for me. Meetings with committees, but, and I go to the conclusion of my speech, what I remember is that in these years, the question that were asked to me changed because the reality has changed. In the 80s, many people were asking me about the political position of our church. In that period, we must confess, it was a quite left-wing political position, and not all people were used to agree with us. In 1990, the big question was, which are your relation with Catholic Church? And now, when I meet people, not in your committee meetings, but in World Communion of Reformed Churches, now the question are 2, refugees and ethics of the church. Generally speaking, I think you are doing exactly the job you were started for. Mr. Beckwith, when he founded your committee, said that we had an evangelistic mission toward Italy, a mission toward people in need, let's think the school he built up, and a mission to be known in Italy as a part of the Italian society. Thank you for your patience.
And thank you very much, Claudio, for your rising to the challenges of the English language. You know, we are extremely grateful to all the contributors who are not native English speakers, that they are able to speak so clearly and so much from the heart about the various issues. And we turn to our next speaker, who is Peter Chiaccio, who is waiting patiently. And Erica is again going to introduce Peter.
Hello, Peter. Hello, everyone. So I think I don't know whether Peter is a mother tongue or whatever, because his mother was from Northern Ireland, but he certainly has a good English, and he spent his year abroad as a student of the Waldensian Church Mission in Salisbury under the supervision of Tim Macquiban. So you can see there is a circle connecting everyone here. He was a minister of the Waldensian Church in Palermo for 9 years, and he's going to talk about that, I think, and has now moved to Trieste very recently, where he's in charge of the Waldensian Church and the Methodist Church there. He's also a very good, very appreciated film critic. He's written several books, and if you look at the titles, you think, oh, this is light stuff, like, I don't know, Harry Potter and the Gospel. And then you read it and you find it's very deep. So it's good that he may attract new readers and young readers to something which is obviously old. And so it's interesting to see this, how good he is in connecting light music, pop music, and other things, and cinema, and being also a serious minister. So here we are.
Hello, good morning, everybody, or actually good afternoon in Italy. It's after 12. So, well, in the Facebook event, it was written that I ended in glory. Actually, I'm still alive here, so I would like to stress on that. Even if my look is more like Paul McCartney after the accident that never happened. It's very good to be with you, to see so many faces of friends and of people that I would like to know better, but the situation makes so that we cannot meet. I would like to greet especially just one person, and not to make a problem to everybody else, to Duncan Henson, because even if we don't know a lot of each other, but I spent 2 months in Ciaccio, so please bring my greetings to Admiral United Church of Christ and to my friends. Seattle is in my heart, really, and I loved it. Okay, so yes, I've been nine years in Palermo. First 2 years as a pastor in the Methodist and Waldensian Church in La Noce, which is just on the side of the Centro Diaconale. And after that, I have been elected in the main Waldensian Church, right in the city center of Palermo. Now, you all know, some of you know how it ended, but how it started, that's something interesting. Because we are Christians and we say that we are all saints, but Martin Luther said that we are saints and sinners at the same time. So when I went to Palermo, some of my colleagues asked me quietly, "Wow, you're going to Palermo. What have you done for this? Why they send you to Palermo?" And maybe I was just already in the Palermo character, so I said, well, I'm not going to tell you why I've been sent to Palermo, so I kept it as a secret. But it's just that, and that shows that for me that was the showing of a prejudice, because I really been fine in Palermo. I love being there, and it's also a place where there is much work to do, and especially as churches. And that the reason why it's especially the difficulty of the administration of Palermo. So there is a lot of unemployment and a lot of illegal jobs. And by illegal jobs, I don't mean the mafia. I mean that you work in as a cleaning lady, and that's illegal. You don't you don't pay taxes. You don't have a contract. And I met a lot of people who don't have a bank account, who are invisible to the government. And in that context, the role of a church can be very important. The mayor of Palermo, Luca Orlando, who became a friend, and he always says that Palermo is a welcoming city, but he's a politician, that's what he has to say. But the welcoming that Palermo does is mostly private, it's from churches. There is very little that the administration can do for financial reasons or for a culture. It's more like, okay, you organize yourself and then we endorse you. So it's quite easy to get an endorsement as long as you don't ask for money. And that's part of the difficulty, but also of the challenge in Palermo. And a big work that has been done there in the years was ecumenical and interreligious dialogue, especially. And I've been in Palermo in difficult years for interreligious dialogue, the years of the attacks in Paris and in other cities. Palermo has a important and historical presence of Muslim people. So thanks to the new Archbishop, who is, I have this expression, he's a Francis boy. He has been appointed by Pope Francis, and he is actually, he transmits what is Pope Francis' ministry locally. He involved us a lot. He asked me straightforwardly for my opinion on how to handle interreligious dialogue in the city, and we worked together to endorse and sponsor the good people in Palermo, just to show people, to show all the other citizens that you know, there are good Muslims, which doesn't mean, you know, I know good Muslims, which could be a patronizing expression, but it means, look, your neighbor is a good person. Look, your butcher, your baker, you know, and he's a good person and he's Muslim, for example. So we done a lot of work on that, and that helped the cohesion of a city that needs cohesion, that is always in danger of exploding for the social difficulties that are there, for the economic depression that the city experiences. And it has been very rewarding to be a pastor in Palermo, and in the end it was sad to leave, but healthy to leave. I think that I understood why I was to move somewhere else when I realized how much can we do in a place, and when you can do a lot, then it's time to let other people do something, and to I don't know if this is the right word, to depersonalize the work. You are there because you are part of the church, because the church is sending you there, and then the church will send somebody else, and we are all together. So there had been two events at the end of my ministry in Palermo, and one I will show you one because it's here with me, and it's out of the picture. I will bring it to you. So Erica was stressing about my Northern Irish origins. Now, so this means that I am somehow partly British and Irish and Italian, but now something that characterizes the British is their mania of collecting things, of going around the world and collecting things. So this is part of my collection. This is the street sign dedicated to Pietro Panaccia, to Pastor Panaccia, and this was a present from the mayor. I didn't steal it. It's not. If it was Abbey Road, I would have thought of stealing it, but okay. It's not as precious as Abbey Road. For me, it's very precious for how I worked to get this, and yeah, I don't like to say, oh, how good I was in getting this street to be named for Pastor Panaccia. Pastor Panaccia is the he has been the founder of the Centro Diaconale in Palermo. He has been the first Christian leader in Palermo to speak openly against the mafia, and he has been a great figure in the ministry of our churches especially in Sicily, but I would say in all of the country. And yeah, so how did I make it? Because that could be a question. Well, there were a lot of people from the anti-mafia environment that were writing articles on papers. We should have a street named to Pastor Panaccia. And that's part of the local culture. You make theater like in ancient Greece. So you write an article to the paper, but when you write an article on the paper, you don't make anything to get a street sign. You have to write a letter to the right office and meet all the people and fight for the thing. So and that's how it was possible, because when I asked the mayor, he said just, of course, if there is somebody who deserves a street in Palermo, that's Pastor Panaccia. And actually that all started with a refusal, because the mayor in 2016, he asked me if we wanted to have a street name for Martin Luther, because there was a kind of fashion in Italy. It's 2017, so let's have a lot of Via Martin Lutero, Parco Martin Lutero, Largo Martin Lutero, Piazza Martin Lutero in Italy. And I said to the mayor, no, I don't want Via Martin Lutero in Palermo. And he said, why? And I said, because I think that the streets of a city should have a trace of citizens who did something in the city. And there is a descendant, a spiritual descendant of Martin Luther in the city who deserves a street sign, and that's Pastor Panaccia. And if you make a Via Martin Luther, it's just like, oh, look how the Protestants lobbied wonderfully to have a Martin Luther Street, which is something that they did in other places. And it's right, they've done so. But if the Reformation, the wave arrived in Palermo, and Pietro Valdo Panaccia, he wasn't related to the Waldensian valleys. He was a Sicilian. His father was from Reggio Calabria, from Calabria. So he's a local, and it's right that he deserves this recognition. And in the end, just on the last day, we managed. There were a lot of oppositions in the offices. There was a lot of back work I had to do and see who was in the office. It wasn't that easy, but in the end, we managed to do it. And one day I will tell the backgrounds when the people involved are dead. Like I will tell about all the people, hoping that I'm the last one to die. Anyway. Then, while the mayor and where is it? Yeah, on the back is the sign of the signature of the mayor on the back of the street sign. The mayor told me, well, you are not thinking you're leaving Palermo, because you will never leave this city. And I look at him and I say, oh, well, this looks like a threat. And And he said, well, you know, we have a surprise for you, but you need to transfer yourself to another city before we can do that. And I understood what was coming, and that was really a great surprise. So he granted me the honorary citizenship of Palermo. And that also something that, you know, as having some British blood in my veins, you know, that's something that that it's important. It was very sad. My mother died some years ago. I didn't see. I know that the British part of my family loved it. So I've been granted this honorary citizenship, and it's difficult to receive such an honor. And I'm trying to finish my speech. It's difficult to receive such an honor because when you receive such a recognition, you may think, how good I was, you know, how good I acted. But sincerely, when you look back and what you've done things because other people helped you to do these things, because they were the conditions to do this. And it's pretty much the inheritance law in the United States. You know, when you die in the United States, half of your property goes back to the community, because if you become rich, it's because the community allowed you to become rich. Now, so if you achieved something, at least this is something that has been told me. I don't know if that's correct, but what is important is to think that many people would deserve an honorary citizenship. Many people would deserve to being told, good job, well done. And we don't. We humans tend to be bad people, because when somebody does something bad, we tend to tell them in a harsh way, in a prompt way. When somebody does something good, we keep the good words for ourselves. So that's, you know, if you bring that to the institutions, it happens the same. A lot of people deserve to be recognized as good citizens, as people that work to create community. What I think, the way I received this citizenship, I felt very humbled. Like I was lucky, I was blessed to be the one who received something that many other people, other pastors would have deserved, and who worked in the shadows, who worked and nobody realized what they were doing. And sometimes I think, when I read the Old Testament, I think that there are very few people in the Old Testament, very few names. I know we get bored when all the names are in the list, but there are very few people. But in order to have an Isaiah, in order to have a David, you need to have a lot of unknown people who built brick by brick the community, and their names will be forgotten. So this honor that I received is an honor that has been given to all these people. That's how I feel it. That's how I experience it. As to all the people that, you know, the volunteer in the church that you asked, oh, could you please open the sanctuary for this? You know, all the people that work because they believed in what the gospel says, and in how they should support the community. You know, so it's very good. It's what we can say. It's a sign of the times that the local administration of Palermo realized that Protestants did a lot in the city. That's important. That's something that we like. But you know, it's not personal. It's something that it's for our whole heritage. Okay, I think I'm pretty much done with it. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. And thank you for your reflections on those who get recognition and those who get over-recognized and those who get overlooked in terms of what they have contributed and what they do contribute to society, to the support of their fellow human beings, and so on. I think it's now time to move to our final speaker, Sara Rivoira, who is going to speak about her work in the archives and out throughout Italy, promoting the cultural heritage. And Erica, I think you're going to introduce Sara.
Word before, as a comment to what Peter Chiaccio said in a very moving way. I'm also the daughter of a Waldensian from Sicily. My father, Filippo Scroppo, was born in a community in a Waldensian church, which had already, and he was born in 1910. He had already 4 grandparents who were Waldensians. So we go back to a long time, and the Panacea family are also related to us, like most Sicilians Waldensian are related, like the people in the valleys. Let's go to somebody who is from the valleys, at least in origin, and that is Sara Rivoira. Being young, she hasn't done so much, but she has spent a lot of time studying. And, you know, so I was surprised to see that she has studied in Pisa, and I don't know why, but that's amazing. So she even has a PhD, but we just don't go on to that. Mainly, she just studied and trained for just to be in charge of what she's doing now. So cultural heritage, books, manuscripts, archive, and she also trained as an archivist in Turin. And since 2015, she's now in charge of beni culturali for Museo, Archivio and Tavola Valdese. She lives in Villar Pellice, where her husband is the pastor, the Waldensian pastor. Villar Pellice is wonderful. If you've never been to the valleys, you can't miss it. But I think Peter Chiaccio did his first sermon just before being ordained, if I remember correctly. So now, Sara.
Okay, thank you, Erica. Good morning, everyone. And I thank you so much for the invitation to this meeting. And firstly, I need to apologize in advance because of my English, but I hope you will bear me. And so I will read my speech, and I want to thank my dear friend Nikki Redden, who has helped me with the translation. And so, such as Erica told, I would like to introduce you to the work of the Cultural Heritage Office of the Waldensian Executive Board, which oversees the cultural heritage of the Waldensian and Methodist churches throughout Italy. So I will try to share a PowerPoint. So I hope it will work. Okay, I hope you are seeing the, okay. So our office has not been in existence long, because it was established by the Synod of 2014 and was founded to carry out what was stated in the agreement that the Waldensian Executive Board made with the Ministry of Cultural Heritage and Activities and Tourism in 2013. That agreement has its origins in the agreement made between our churches and the Italian state in 1984, and recognizes that, amongst other things, the heritage of a small minority such as ours is an integral part of the Italian national cultural heritage. For us, this means great opportunities, but of course also great responsibility. Our office deals with a wide and diverse heritage comprising objects, documents, books, buildings, historical places, memories and practices, biography, and so on. And to introduce you to our work, I've chosen 3 keywords that we generally use when doing presentation, and they are knowledge, conservation, and communication of the cultural heritage of the Methodist and Waldensian churches. And afterwards, I would like to show you one of our many projects. So, knowledge. We used to this word because our cultural heritage must be studied and described according to common and shared standards. And this work, of course, is done by professionals like archivists and historian, librarian, and museum experts. However, it's for us also so important to involve the communities as much as possible, and we seek to develop activities and to collaborate with them. In fact, we also want to set up a process by which the local community can begin to understand the significance and value of their heritage. This way, local people will become aware of the assets they have had passed down to them and feel part of their history, becoming involved alongside the professional in the care and promotion of their heritage and passing on what they have received from the past on to the future generation. Further to this, the communities are also the bearer of values, knowledge, and skills that need to be protected and valued, an intangible, but also an integral part of the heritage of a community. So the second keyword is conservation. Our cultural heritage must be preserved, and maintaining our cultural heritage is an act of responsibility toward our churches and towards the community. Our work is not limited to the heritage preserved in institutions such as Waldensian Archives in Torre Pellice, or the Waldensian Library offices, or Casa Valdese in Torre Pellice. Our office must support the churches with their local responsibility for daily management. And the third keyword, communication, and also I want to say sharing. The significance is that we have received an important cultural heritage from past generation, and it's our duty to share with the future generation in order to keep it alive. Communication about and promotion of one's heritage, it's a task which is open to all citizens. Each one of us has the right not only to enjoy and benefit from our heritage, but also to play an active part in promoting initiatives that involve the use, study, knowledge of our cultural heritage. And in order to support these 3 areas, since the beginning, we have also been working towards providing a computerized system. This is called Abacum, and that means the Waldensian and Methodist Cultural Archives of Heritage and Cultural Activities. That's a digital platform and an online communication tool for cataloging and enhancing the value of cultural content. Part of this includes a website that you can read here in the slide, which I invite you to visit. There you can find lots of material, more than 15,000 historical photographs of the Waldensian valleys and of Italy, dozens of inventories of the historical archives of individual Waldensian and Methodist churches. You can find also the inventories of the family archives collected together by the Waldensian Historical Society, and the catalog of some of the collection in the Waldensian Museum, the collection of painting by Paolo Pasquet, and the digital copies of the local newspaper Eco delle Valli Valdesi from 1848 and 1992, which is now published under the name Riforma, and I think many of you know the newspaper. And also, of course, some portrait of Charles Beckwith, for example. And every year we are uploading more. For example, one of our next projects is to put online the digitalized copy of some of the historical correspondence of the Waldensian Executive Board from the 18th and early 19th century. So we are beginning this digitalization work right now. And in the next few years, we hope to be able to put online all the registers of birth, baptisms, marriages, and deaths belonging to our churches from the end of the 17th to the mid-20th century. This is the homepage, but you can visit directly the website. We will find also some pages in English. And I particularly would like to invite you to visit the section of the website dedicated to itineraries of visit linked to the presence of Protestants in some of our Italian cities, for example, Turin and Florence. We have worked on these itineraries in order to emphasize the fact that Protestant history is intricately linked to Italian history. And we want to show that even in cities like, for example, Florence, that's one of the most well-known and visited Italian cities, there is a Protestant cultural heritage. A heritage made up of buildings, places, of remembrance, and of the story of its people. So Florence was the cradle of the Renaissance, but it was also the cradle of Italian Protestantism. And because of this, we have put together 2 tours or itineraries in Florence. So one is dedicated to important places about Protestant history in the city, like the Salviati Palace, which today is a Waldensian guest house, but originally was the seat of the Waldensian Theological Faculty before becoming the Gould Institute for Children. And another itinerary is dedicated to significant and important people, such as Piero Guicciardini, who was from a noble Florentine family and became a Protestant and built up the richest collection in Italy of books about the Reformation, now part of the National Library of Florence. So in 2021, we will continue our work. And if you would like to continue to follow us, you can do so by visiting our website or our Facebook page and also our YouTube channel. And I would like to end my speech with a brief video on YouTube, and I will try to launch it from my computer, and I hope also you can also hear the music. So let's try. Okay, thank you so much. But anyway, I invite you to visit our YouTube channel. You will find lots of videos about history, and so I have finished my speech, and thank you so much for listening. And I hope to see you in Italy soon, maybe.
Thank you so much, Sara. That was really interesting and clearly a resource we can go back to online and physically sometime, and many connections with places and people, and you know, very stimulating, I'm sure, also for families to look at these records of where their ancestors have been and what the lives that they led. Do I have any? Is there any questions for Sara immediately now?
Ian,
Sure.
there's Kate Grand has a hand up.
Right, Kate.
Yeah, can I just say, Sara, how grateful I am to you for all that you and your team have put online. Back in October and November, I am the editor of the Waldensian Fellowship newsletter, and I was looking for more details on some things, and I came across the website, and I could have spent days and days and days there, and there is quite a lot in English, or some of the photographs you can just look at and enjoy, even if you haven't got any Italian. But it's absolutely brilliant. It's a fantastic treasure trove, so I can heartily recommend it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think I will start to draw things to a close. I think we owe a huge debt of thanks to all these speakers who have contributed so many different aspects and reflections on the Waldensian Church and its relations throughout Europe, and so huge thanks, and I think we also need to give some thanks to those who have contributed to the organization of this meeting: Mike Thomason, Alistair Morris, and our tireless committee generally. And Erica too, for her perceptive introductions. Can I underline again the fact that, I mean, the major activity of the English Committee for the Waldensian Missions, the Waldensian Church Missions, is to support the activities of the Waldensian churches. So if you feel moved by what you've heard today, you might want to go to make a donation to the work of the committee, and we will guarantee that money is spent well. And here we have the pages on the website where you can donate online and know that your money is going to be guarded carefully. And you can also go to the very fine bookshop, online bookshop, and browse there and buy books about Waldensian history. And there are also the wonderful calendars that come out each year. There's a beautiful one for 2021 that is still on the first page. So if you don't have yours yet, do go and consider buying there. I think I need also to thank all the wonderful contributions. The attendance at this meeting has been phenomenal, and very moved that so many people have been able to come and join in this reflection and celebration of all things Waldensian. So thank you for your presence and your contributions. We will hope perhaps to be meeting soon in person, but I think we will reflect on the benefits that we've derived from being essentially forced to have an online virtual meeting like this, as we see the significant benefits that it brings in terms of involvement to people without the necessity to travel. So thank you all very much for your participation, and may all of you remain healthy, and may we all soon be released from the problems of the pandemic. Can I close with saying the grace? The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen. So thank you all very much, and go well.